you worked for one of the great masters of conversational management in Sir Alex Ferguson. What did you learn from that period in your life at United and working under him?
Working under him was incredible, an amazing opportunity. I was young at the time, and I think what he had, the ability to make sort of human connections across the building. He could have conversations with the wider staff around everything, you know. He empowered his staff. He put them on a pedestal with the players, so he would support his staff, and I think that's really important.
Can you tell us how you manage a player's minutes and what are the signs you look for?
On a daily basis, we collect a huge amount of information on the player. We collect sleep hours, we collect subjective feelings of how they are, muscle soreness, energy levels. We take some blood measures. We monitor them every day in training in terms of how far they run, how fast they run, turns, twists, accelerations, decelerations, different speeds. And we do that within matches as well. Sometimes, players will also tell you that they might not be able to go for 90 minutes, not many times, because most of them will want to do that. But particularly when players coming back from injury, they'll have a good idea about where they feel like they're at, particularly some of the more experienced players as well. The MLS as a landscape, sometimes we would play a game in Toronto on a Saturday, New York on a Wednesday, Miami on the following Sunday, and then you think back and you're like, if that was in England, if we were at United there, we would have played like Paris, then we would have gone to Munich, and then we might have played a game in the south of Portugal on the same week. It's like it's really difficult, the demand of what that is on the player as well in terms of what you ask them to do. So I think from a sports science perspective and how you put the sort of support systems around the players is really important.
Gary, thanks for joining us in this busy time for yourself and a busy schedule. We've just seen you leave a big team meeting. Is there anything you can tell us from that meeting?
It was with the sporting director, Jason, so maybe it's some confidential information, but it's obviously just us focusing on the run into the end of the season and how we can hopefully finish the season strong.
Well, it's a good point to be having this conversation then, because those of us looking at the top teams on television wonder how they're managing the fatigue and the fixture congestion, the workload on their bodies, the intensity of modern football. I imagine this is a kind of critical period for you, isn't it, in your job?
Yeah, it really is, yeah. So we've got 8 games to go. The players have played 30 games already so far this season. They've been training since July. And the demands on players is going up. You see our physical metrics from the season this season were high for the majority of the physical metrics in terms of our playing style. And the league is essentially developing like that. We know over the last 10 years there's been huge increases in the physical demand on players. Games are getting longer as well. That also is something that makes a difference in that. And there's more games as well. So players are performing higher intensity actions, more of those higher intensity actions, more sprinting. And they're being asked to do it far more many times, across the course of the season with all the additional competitions, both international and national level that happens. But from us at the club here, yeah, we're focusing on the last 8 games and finishing as strong as we can at this time.
I mean, you saw the kind of ultimate test of players in a way when you were at Manchester United for a decade, and I wonder, you were part of very much of a trophy-winning setup there, but how much has it changed since then? When you look at the game now and where Brighton are and what the game was like in 20 years ago, what's the difference?
There's been a couple of studies that's come out recently looking at like the last 10 years, particularly the Premier League. Total distance has stayed relatively similar, about a couple of % increase over the last 10 to 15 years, so not massive changes. But I think the real change has been with probably, the tactical evolution that's happened in the game. I think modern day coaching now probably involves, you see teams pressing, counter-pressing, teams making advantages in, offensive transition, the defensive transition that's required to recover back into position and into shape. So the things that have changed massively over the last 10 years is high-speed running distance for players and sprinting distance for players, and they've gone up probably 30 to 40% in the last 10 years, and the number of sprints that players have to do, about 50% on a weekly basis, that's happened over the last 10 years.
Right. Do you feel that tallies with what you're seeing, Bergs? Is that what you feel you're looking at as well?
Yeah, most definitely. I think that from when I played the game many moons ago now, heart rate monitors were just coming in at the stage of just like of the evolution, and I think something called a protein shake was being invented back then. So the game's changed for the good. Of course, the sports science behind it is now on a completely different level. If I asked you a question in terms of someone that doesn't know your role within the football club, like what would you say your key components are within the team aspect, but also maybe an individual aspect of what you do within the club?
Yep, so I've been at the club now since July 2024. I started as head of performance, so essentially a performance department. So I oversee strength and conditioning, sports science, nutrition, and data science, really, and that the practitioners that provide those services to the first team players. Over the last 4 months, I've taken on role as interim head of performance and medical. So now it's overseeing the medical service delivery as well. So the sports physicians we have here, the medical doctors, physiotherapy, the other therapeutic services that we have, and also as players get injured, the rehabilitation processes, etc. as well. So like we have a team of 20 sort of clinicians and practitioners that provide support services to the players across sort of sports science, performance and medical. And it's really just aligning and ensuring that's as collaborative as possible so we can ultimately provide the best service delivery to the players, because it's all about really getting them in the best shape every week to allow them to perform at the weekend.
Because performance and medicine sound like two different things, but it sounds like you brought them together because they are actually one thing. Is that right?
Yeah, it's really, really important that it's aligned, because it's fundamental, really, that the two strands are working, in collaboration and working for the same benefit. And ultimately, our aim is to be the best prepared team in the league.
So, and we talk a lot, again, I mean, we're talking in a week when the Champions League results haven't gone particularly well for English clubs, and people are fixating on fatigue as one of the factors. Do you think there's an extra fatigue factor in the Premier League because of the fixtures and because it's such a competitive league? And do you think we're seeing that now a bit?
Yeah, I think so. I definitely think that could potentially have a factor within that. There's no winter break in the Premier League, and we know that there is within some of those other leagues. So that's potential one aspect. It's difficulty that there's, in the Premier League, there's very few easy games. Even the teams against the games against the bottom of the league teams, they still can have huge physical demand on the players, to get results in them games. So, across the course of the season, you're asking them players multiple times a week to perform at a really, really high intensity, and obviously the recovery is massively important within that. Squad rotation is very important. The size of squads that players have, that teams have within those squad makeups, but I definitely think that's got to have some level of factor at this stage of the season, where some of those European teams look a little bit fresher than English teams.
We talk a lot about minutes. Everyone talks about minutes now. In our day, they talked about hours, didn't they? And days and weeks. But now we manage minutes. Can you tell us how you manage a player's minutes and what are the signs you look for?
There's an art and a science, I think, really. So we collect a large amount of information. So minutes is ultimately the end point, really, of what that looks like. On a daily basis, we collect a huge amount of information on the player. We collect sleep hours, we collect subjective feelings of how they are, muscle soreness, energy levels. We take some blood measures. We monitor them every day in training in terms of how far they run, how fast they run, turns, twists, accelerations, decelerations, different speeds. And we do that within matches as well. But we also sort of monitor how that player responds on a daily basis, and that's ultimately really important to us. And I think, we use that information, we speak with the head coach, and we look at potentially what the game could entail at the weekend in terms of the demands on the position and what that looks like, and then we try and make recommendations accordingly. So I think it's more important if we're playing really congested fixture periods in terms of what players have demonstrated previously, that they can play multiple games in a week and they can perform at high level in terms of high physical outputs across those times. I think when you're playing Saturday to Saturday, that's a little bit easier. Sometimes minute restrictions, or we make recommendations around players' minutes, sometimes around players returning from injury, how long they've been out, how many training sessions they've been able to complete before going back into training, and then type of things. And that's probably makes us sort of make those recommendations as a sort of performance and medical group. But we'll have quite sort of like long discussions around what that looks like. We won't just pluck numbers out of the air. We'll try and be very data informed in terms of what that looks like too. And I think that's really important. We collect a lot of information from the players. It's how we collect that information, how we sort of gain insight from it, how we feed back to the players too. I think that's really important, and the other key stakeholders as well, because they are human beings. And I know you've spoken with Mark Locke, in terms of technology and AI, and we can leverage a lot of those things to get more insight around the player, but ultimately the people, and we're people and we're working with people, and we need to try and connect with them on that daily basis as well. So that their subjective feelings of where they're at. Sometimes players will also tell you that they might not be able to go for 90 minutes, not many times, because most of them will want to do that. But particularly when players coming back from injury, they'll have a good idea about where they feel like they're at, particularly some of the more experienced players as well.
Yeah, it must be really interesting. If you maybe look at your Manchester United background with the players that you've worked with, I can't imagine someone like Wayne Rooney being in today's game with his minutes and things like that, really. But when I look at the game today, the game has changed in terms of the pace of the game and the way, but there are still fundamental facts that you still need to defend your set plays. You still need to, those smaller areas. So
absolutely.
what would you say has kind of stayed in the game in terms of what you look at in player profile that's been there probably from your days at Manchester United?
Yeah, I think, Wayne would still be, even now, I'm sure he'd be wanting to train and playing every day, because that's the type of player that he was. I think in terms of what things have stayed, obviously football essentially is still football. There's still certain aspects of football in terms of training practices that are the same 15, 20 years ago. The things that change when you move from club to club, or potentially that, is the game model of the head coach. And the game model of the head coach generally dictates the way that you're going to train. Like, I was fortunate to work with a number of coaches in Manchester, and they were all successful, to certain levels, some really, really successful, but they didn't do things the same way. They prepared players in different ways depending on what their game model was. So I think from a performance perspective, I probably would have been at the start quite sort of strict on what I would have thought the right or wrong way to do that was. And you realise when working with a number of different coaches, European coaches, Southern Europe, mainland Europe, and you get real good understanding that there's multiple ways to do that and multiple ways to prepare players. But I think what's really important within all of it, Adam, is like we got 25 players, 27 players within the squad. They're all individuals. We've got players here at Brighton from 17 in Harry Howell to 40 James Milner. We can't ask them all to do the same thing every day. It's not logical based off age, injury history, genetics, all of these type of things. They play different positions. They've got different requirements. So it really is important for us to try and individualise that as much as possible so we can make the best recommendations, really. And that's all we're trying to do. We're trying to be as informed as possible to try and advise those stakeholders, be that the gaffer or the coaching staff, around what training looks like on certain days. But typically the things that have stayed the same, going back to your questions, warm-ups, some players like them, some players don't. We'll call them physical preparation and activation and get some of our sort of sciencey buzzwords in, but warm-ups are the same. Players still do different possessions, rondo-based games, different small-sided games. They'll be similar to what they would have been 15, 20 years ago when I first started. 11v11s is obviously, the nature of it might change depending on exactly what you're going after from your tactical principles. But I think what's come into the game more recently is probably, you speak about set pieces, more the focus on set pieces, and giving much more of the training content for that, whether that's attacking or defending set pieces.
Yeah, well, with that change in the game that everybody talks about, particularly this season, have the numbers changed? So supposedly you've got less possession and passing now, and you've got more direct play and more set piece and so on. Is that changing your job at all, or is it a myth that the game has changed in the last year or so? Yeah,
I think in the last year it hasn't changed. I don't think too much, not particularly from the numbers perspective. Again, I think sprint distance and high speed running's higher than what it was last season. Maybe it's a little bit more of the directness that you talk about. But the other type of aspects I don't think have changed too much, definitely from a year-to-year perspective. Over the last 5 years, there's been quite significant change towards that. As I say, the high-speed running, the sprinting, the number of sprints that players are required to do in games.
Yeah, and Brighton have still basically stuck with passing and possession, haven't they, as a basic approach, as the starting point?
I think so, And with Fabian's style, the way that we want to play and physically try and dominate our opponents, our intensity being our identity is one of the things that the gaffer speaks about. So obviously we're gonna play with an intense style of play, and that's probably increased slightly from last year to this year as well.
Yeah, I'd say picking up on my second point, I know the game's changed, and I don't want to sit here sounding like a dinosaur in terms of the way that I ask you questions. But when I was playing, it was very much like the physio would speak to me and ask how I felt. Yeah. And could you play? Mm-hmm. Is there still a part in the game of your role where you actually just have a conversation? Say Lewis Dunk as an example. Can you play 90 minutes? How much? Rather than maybe looking at the stats and looking at the data and everything, like the kind of subjective and the objective view still.
Yeah, 100%. We use the objective information to try and inform some of our decisions, but as I say, yeah, the human element's absolutely massive. You have that conversation. The players that are, somebody like a Lewis, he's played 500 plus games for the club. He's got a real good understanding of where he's at, and you have to trust and respect that. And absolutely, people like James, Jason, Danny, Solly, they've played so many games. They've got a really good understanding of where they're at, and you absolutely have to respect that as well. So we would definitely have those conversations. We wouldn't base the minutes in and around that. As I say, those type of things will be players coming back from injury, and the players will generally tell you where they feel they're at as well. And they're pretty good judges at times.
Talking of conversations, I mean, you worked for one of the great masters of conversational management in Sir Alex Ferguson, who had this brilliant ability to work people out, to assess them, to judge them, and work out what he needed to do to them or with them to get the best out of them. What did you learn from that period in your life at United and working under him?
Yeah, no, working under him was incredible, an amazing opportunity. I was young at the time, and I think what he had, the ability to make sort of human connections across the building, from the ladies in the canteen, the tea ladies, to Kath Phipps, who was on reception, to myself, who was sort of 26, 27, to Albert Morgan, the kit man, who was a similar age to him, and he could have conversations with the wider staff around everything. We would talk around my interest, but he would talk around American history and politics with people that were interested. Yet he would talk about horse racing with somebody else, the kit man, or he could have incredible relationships. So I think that was really important, that you got that human connection with him. And what he did was he empowered his staff. He really trusted his staff. And he put them on a pedestal with the players, so he would support his staff, and I think that's really important when you're in the daily grind of the season and there's ups and downs, that you do have that trust and that support from the leader within the building. I think that's vital, really, and you really wanted to work for him.
To me, he was a genius at making people want to please him, and if you felt you'd got his approval, you'd go home, 10 feet high, wouldn't you? He was incredibly good at. To me, that was one of his magic ingredients. Even world-class players wanted to impress and to please him, and that's a great skill of management, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And I think you felt it on a daily basis. Like, you did. You wanted to go in. You wanted to impress. You wanted to, I think like we all do on a daily basis, we want to come in and feel like we're making a difference. We want to feel like we're impacting. We're working with players to make a difference, and we're helping the process. And yeah, you'd go home at days and you feel like you've fulfilled that and done it. But at times you'd also be a bit scared of it as well. Like and I think that also, if there's times within the season where it makes you feel a little bit on edge, then you're also going to sort of work a little bit as well, because that's really important too.
Part of the equation, of course, wasn't it? And standard setting, you must feel, I guess, that you're in an environment here where there are standards, and they're actual standards. They're not just verbal standards. That the club has levels it wants to get to. Is that your feeling?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think that comes from, as we just had a conversation now with the sporting director and technical director, it comes from Fabian, the head coach, in terms of his behaviours and the things that he wants us to do as staff and as players. And it definitely comes from the players as well, in terms of their efforts on a daily basis, what we do in the gym in preparation for training, the intensity we train at, how we focus on the recovery processes. So all of those type of things is really important. We've got some great role models here with obviously James, making the Premier League record a couple of weeks ago. If that doesn't inspire you as a young player to want to achieve some of the things that he's achieved, and he's still got the desire and drive to do that every day, then that's incredible. Jason gets a call up to the England squad. There's some really, really great role models here for players that have got exceptional standards, and as staff we want to develop that too.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch upon your time in MLS with FC Cincinnati. When you've maybe been at a club like Manchester United, that is set the benchmark for many years of success and trophies, bringing through young players, selling the best players onto, Real Madrid, and then you're at Brighton. That's a culture change from when I was here to where we are. I've covered a lot of the league as a pundit, watching the league grow. I played against MLS sides when I was at Celtic, when that was a real part-time league. I just wanted to kind of get your insight in terms of the sports science that's available for you out there, in terms of how important is that for you to still try and keep with the principles, going up against a league that's still on the rise, because you've got young players coming through from college, you've still got your DP players, and you've still got, you know, veterans, etc., etc. So how much did you learn from your experience out in America?
Yeah, no, it was a great experience. And as you say, moving from Manchester United, such a traditional and historic club, I essentially moved to a brand new franchise, a start-up company, really it was. But it was a blank canvas to really try and build and develop an infrastructure. We built a stadium, and I was involved in the sort of performance and medical aspect of that. We built training ground, which was, you know, probably not as good as this, but getting close to that. So the level of investment into infrastructure, into staff, into technology was excellent, really, at that time at Cincinnati. And it was an opportunity, as I say, to step a little bit, massively out of my comfort zone in terms of overseeing a performance medical department, you know, working in a different culture. But the sports science principles, I think the MLS as a landscape, like Major League Soccer, it does challenge sports science, really, because you've got a huge country, you've got travel, which is a massive part of that. You know, sometimes we would play a game in Toronto on a Saturday, New York on a Wednesday, Miami on the following Sunday, and then you think back and you're like, if that was in England, if we were at United there, we would have played like Paris, then we would have gone to Munich, and then we might have played a game in the south of Portugal on the same week. It's like, it's really difficult, the demand of what that is on the player as well in terms of what you ask them to do. So I think from a sports science perspective, you have to adopt a number of strategies to do that. And you play across 3 different time zones, you play games at altitude. We'll see in the World Cup in the summer, like the temperature in the summer across America, you know, particularly in Florida, in Texas, we were in the Midwest and we would have 35 degrees and really high humidity. So how you have to adapt your training practices for that to try and still maintain intensity, and how you put the sort of support systems around the players is really important. But yeah, the players, there's a big range. Obviously, you know, if you've covered it from the designated players to the high sort of TAM and players like that, where you can pay the players a little bit more money, to players that you come through the college system. So I do think the standard's improving.
Yeah.
Definitely the level of professionalism and the support that goes around that is improving as well. And I think with the World Cup and the Club World Cup going to America, hopefully that just continues to improve across, you know, the next couple of years. But it was definitely a period that you felt like you could almost really try and shape something in my philosophy, really. And I think like there's not many. It was quite a unique opportunity because it was such a blank canvas, really, to really try and put things in place. And you know, there was real ups and downs. We had some hard times at the start, and then we started to progress, and you know, eventually became successful. So it was really enjoyable.
And there are a lot of international players in this squad now, and they wouldn't be human if they weren't thinking, okay, it's March, it's nearly April. I've got to be right when I get to that World Cup. I've got to be fit, and I can't be exhausted. That's a natural human impulse, and we've seen it for generations. But in the context of your job, how do you manage that so that you look after those players, which you would anyway, and you reassure them that they can still play to the maximum in these remaining games in the domestic campaign and still get to the World Cup in good nick?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we do. We have good communication and collaboration with all of the national teams that our players play for. We have good information exchanges, and you know, we'll also, as well as just sending information, we'll have calls with a lot of the staff as well, just to give them an idea of where those players are at. And yeah, I think with the players they trust the process in terms of we'll train hard at the right times within the week, and then we'll try and recover, so we prepare the players at the back end of the season. So we hope that our group at the end of the season are fit and as strong as they were on day one of the season, and hopefully that can carry them on for hopefully another 6 to 8 weeks that they might have to go at the end of the season. And yeah, I don't worry too much about it. We give those international players periods and pockets of the season where they could have some rest, because it's hard as the international player during the international breaks. They're traveling around the world, and we have, you know, Japanese players, South American players, African players that are covering sort of extensive mileage during that period as well. So you know, we'll support them as much as possible, and you know, Fabian's been really good in trying to give them additional periods of rest where appropriate during the season. Yeah,
because I mean, you said that these players started training in July, and some of them will clock off in July. The ones who get to the later rounds of the World Cup, I know that's always been the case, but when you look at the intensity level they're playing at now, to imagine doing that for 12 months is mind-blowing, really, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that's where people now starting to talk about the demands on the modern-day player. As I say, more high intensity and repeated sprint actions in the game, more minutes in every game, and probably more number of games. So those players that are the international players, bigger World Cups, you know, FIFA Club World Cups, UEFA Nations
Yeah.
League. Like everything's starting to grow even for the international player as well. So
48
more and
team
more
World
games.
Cup.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a lot of players.
It is.
yeah.
How's VAR impacted your your work? Because it seems that decisions are taking longer. You can clearly see someone's played the ball, but they still want to look at it 15 more times. Like, you must be tearing your hair out sometimes when a VAR, decision is going to be made. How's that impacted you in terms of your job, the VAR in the game?
I think what it has had the opportunity is where there is the break in games, players are allowed, they can probably get drinks or they can get some nutrition from the sideline. So that probably is something that never used to happen. So we can maybe get a little bit more hydration, nutrition into the player during the game. The one that I don't like is where it's a clear offside and then, they carry the play on, which is a clear offside and, usually involves a sprint back, a last gasp action, and I worry that players going to get injured in that moment, which the game's clearly going to get stopped, and they're the ones that frustrate me. But not made a massive difference apart from just elongating the amount of time that the game takes. But we try and sort of be creative in how we can use some of them stoppages.
What about information overload, Gary? Because managers of an older generation used to say before a game, if you overload players, if you give them too much information, they'll just switch off. So.
Say again.
Thank you. We set that one up earlier. So obviously there is this incredible volume of information now, particularly in the run up to a game, for example. And so how do you stop yourself making their heads spin with too much information?
Yeah, as we get close to a game, we give the players from the performance medical side, we give them almost no information from that side of it. I think the players are focusing very much on what the tactical and technical requirements, what the game plan is, and even from the head coach and the technical staff, they'll probably give the players a little bit more information earlier in the week and then just try and simplify the game model into some key points as the players are going into the game, because we want them players to obviously understand what we want them to do, but we want them to be free to go and obviously play the game in the way that they need to play that, obviously respecting all of the tactical principles that we need them to do as well.
No, absolutely. Well, has there been a moment in your career where you've thought, this is why I do this job? One standout. Was it winning the Champions League, maybe?
Yeah, that was in the first year, actually. So, I probably could have packed in after that. Yeah, absolutely. I think, obviously I was at a period at Manchester United where it was a hugely successful time. We got to Champions League finals, I think 3 out of 4 seasons, and we won 4 Premier Leagues and the FA Cup and other European trophies. So I think winning and the opportunity to celebrate that with the players and the staff that you work with on a daily basis, that gives you obviously that's why I do the job. But you can't always win, and then you get to understand that isn't. And the reason that probably we all got into it, I got into it for sure, was to try and feel like you're making a difference with players. So I think back to players that I've worked with that have gone into go into the first team and sort of achieve their dreams and ambitions, and I think they're the things that give you the sense of satisfaction, like when players get injured, which is obviously a horrible period and part and parcel of the game, but when you've worked with a player and you've been on that journey with them and they return to play and they return back to doing what they love to do after an extended period out, I think they're the things that really give you that innate sort of feeling of satisfaction and joy, because ultimately I think we're trying to provide a service for the players. That's why we're here, and when you see those players sort of achieving or re-achieving what they want to do, I think that's what really makes you feel like you've done the job and you want to do it.
The Champions League win was that mad night in Moscow, wasn't it?
Against Chelsea. It was,
When the game finished about 2 a.m, didn't it? Or something?
It did. It was local time. I might have even been later, I think it was, yeah.
I remember getting to bed at 5 a.m. that day and I was thinking, what happened there? I went to a game last night and it's 5 o'clock in the morning. What have I been, But it was an incredible night, wasn't it? And I don't suppose you'll forget it in a hurry.
No, definitely not. Hopefully I would love the opportunity to experience some of those things at Brighton. I wasn't here when the club was in Europe a couple of years back, and to win a trophy with the club would be amazing.
Yeah, and we kind of ask all our guests this, but the culture and the environment here, particularly at this training ground, nobody could walk in here and think this is a lackadaisical club, could they? Really, it's pretty obvious straight away that where the standards are.
Oh, absolutely.
Is that how you felt when you arrived?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I think Brighton has, from the outside looking in, the reputation in terms of how it's run as being, I think a load of people say it's the best run club in the Premier League. And I think speaking to the people during the interview process, and I met I was fortunate enough to meet the chairman and meet Paul, meet David Weir, meet Mike Cave, Rose Reed, and everybody I spoke to gave you such a really good feeling about what the future was going to be in terms of what that vision would look like, and then coming and seeing the facilities at the training ground, the recovery facilities, the training facilities, the gym facilities, the nutrition facilities. It's absolutely exceptional. So from my side, in terms of performance medical, we don't really have any excuses in terms of what we can and can't provide the players. And as you say, it's up to us to try and get those plans in place to try and get the boys prepared as possible and hopefully performing as well as we can do. But absolutely, the standards are really high, and hopefully we can contribute towards that as well.
We spoke to Paul Barber. He was talking about James Milner's impact in terms of what he was looking for within the training ground, and Paul was away on holiday, and James calls him for 2 hours when he's trying to come along with these ideas. How much does the club listen to you? And if you came to the club with an idea, if you wanted to maybe build something or add something into the training ground, it must be a wonderful opportunity to be here with a club that has huge ambitions to make the club grow. How much impact could you have in that in terms of an idea that the club would back you with?
Yeah, I think they really would, Adam, as well. I think we've just got to explain what the benefits would be, how that can try and impact performance. I think ultimately that's what we're here to do. We're trying to affect the performance of the player and definitely the preparation of what we can do. So I think if we can make a case for why something that we want, an intervention, can be successful or can add to what we currently do, I've got no hesitation that the club would support that. From all my conversations with the sporting and technical director here, Jason and Mike, from Paul and Tony's perspective, as I say, they'd be very supportive from a performance medical side if there was things that we wanted to do to try and address that further. And different modalities, different treatments, different innovation within this space. I think if we can do that and be forward thinking, then it'll definitely be adopted for sure, no problem.
I cannot tell you how much it's changed.
Yeah.
Honestly,
you can.
The training ground.
I think it'll make your teeth itch if I had to tell you what. I mean, Malcolm Stewart, love him to bits, used to bring his dog in and he used to put oil on our legs. The dog used to lick our legs all the time. There'll be periods in the time where Mickey Adams would be Mickey Adams is very much if you're injured, that's not a good thing. So to use time up, we used to have paint the walls and kind of just try and find things to do. If the masseuse came in for the day, you'd literally had to run in from training and write your name on the list. But then if I was a young player, put my name up, then the senior pros would just cross your name out and you'd be kind of 5 o'clock in the afternoon. So it's just wonderful to see, really. And in fairness, there's no excuses now, really, is there, in terms of player performance and results as well. So it must be exciting times for you to be part of a club that's got ambitions to go further, to win major trophies and compete in Europe.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was the main reason for me coming back as well. Hopefully I can contribute to the club's ambitions as well. But really, really ambitious plans from the club, and hopefully we can drive that forward as well.
Brilliant. Well, if you can keep us going till the end of the season as well, Gary, we'll give you our...
What, me and you, or the squad?
No, we've got a recovery facility down the road, and we've got some great nutrition here.
We'll give you some data in a minute. You won't be very impressed with it, but we'll... we've got some quickfire questions for you.
Ice bath, love it or hate it?
Personally or professionally? So Personally, I hate the cold, so I would say I hate it. Professionally, it's if players have got muscle soreness, it's the best thing that they could do. So it's not if we've got congested periods and we're playing Saturday, Wednesday, that's one of the things we'll want the lads to do.
We had a game in Torquay and we had to go in the sea the next day because we were staying down we had Plymouth Russell Slade stuck us in the sea.
Really?
Oh my gosh. What would you say the toughest part of your job is?
I think I sort of alluded to it before. It's managing the players as individuals within a squad. So you got, as I say, 27 players, ensuring they all get what they need based off their strengths and weaknesses, what they need to do on the pitch, what they need to do for the head coach, what they need to develop physically, but also what they need to prepare them for games. So spinning all those plates on a daily basis to hopefully get us into the best place on a Friday to perform on a Saturday. I'd say that's the toughest part, but that's the best part.
Apart from the Amex, what would you say the best experiences in the stadium for you?
I remember games back, we played a game in Turkey in Europe and the stadium was shaking. I'm sure it was Galatasaray back in the day and the whole stadium was shaking. It was the noise was incredible. That's probably the most, but maybe some of the European nights for Manchester United, Barcelona in semi-final, probably the one for me.
Yeah. Oh, if you weren't working in football, what would you be doing now?
Definitely sport. Yeah, it's the thing that I love, the passion that I've got. I love golf, so hopefully something in sport, maybe golf. And when I was in America, I really got into the NFL, so potentially the NFL.
I was going to ask you, sorry, are there other sports that you've kind of worked in that you've kind of taken from maybe America with the NFL, the basketball, etc., that you've brought into Brighton?
Yeah, we went to visit quite a few of those sports. We were fortunate in Cincinnati that we had American football and we had baseball, so got some good links with some of the practitioners that work there. Different sports, American football, a big strength and power sport, so we can take some things from that. Previously to working in Manchester United, I worked for the English Institute of Sport, which works with Olympic-based athletes as well, so I've tried to have a little bit more of an experience than just football as well, and I think, you know, with Mike Anthony coming in as well from a different perspective now and sees things through a different lens, then he can challenge the things that we do as well, and hopefully that helps us improve too. Yeah,
cross-fertilisation. Well, I don't know about you, Bergs, but I've learned a lot. Yeah, I mean, you hear these, you know, you read and you hear things about data analysis and how it works and player preparation, but to hear it in that much detail and so well laid out is a real treat. So thank you, Gary, and the best of luck for the end of the season. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Cheers, mate.
Cheers.